Welcome back to the channel. This is Anka Engineering, and I'm Herman Wiegman. I got my play clothes on, the car's outside, and we're ready to talk tire pressures. Okay, in this video I'd love to talk about tire pressures for track and autocross use, particularly for the Jaguar F-Type. And I run with a Jaguar F-Type V6. And there's been a lot of chatter on the various Facebook owners groups or the Jaguar forums online. And I'm going to share what I've done with my tire pressures using both 19-inch and 20-inch rims. Okay, my car is 3,700 pounds and the weight bias is close to 50-50, but it's 54 front, 46% rear, 52% left, and 48% right. So there is a weight bias towards the left front tire in my car with driver seated. Alright, so the rest of the video will go over reading the tread. That's an alternative means to setting tire pressures to get the use of the tire dialed in for the event, be it track or autocross. We'll talk about TPMS sensors and also setting where we think the target tire pressure should be. Okay, let's get into it. This is a TPMS, or a tire pressure monitoring system reader. It's really nice. It can read the signals that come off from the tire pressure senders, and it will give you both pressure and temperature. And this, of course, is just a standard gauge. I really like these because they're very convenient when you're bleeding down the pressure. This thing doesn't bleed pressure for you. It simply just reads the sensor, while this is the actual device that I'm using anyway, to take down the air pressure and just to check it. Now the readings between this gauge and this gauge may not match, but that's okay, because once I've taken my readings with the TPMS gauge, I can then say, all right, I feel like I want to take a tire pressure down 2 psi, and just real quick take it down 2 psi relative to this gauge. I just wanted to show the TPMS sensor that I found worked well for the Jaguar F-Type, and it has this part number at the bottom, GX63-1A159-AA, and that's the TPMS sensors that work well with Jaguar and Land Rover products. These are the Pilot Sport 4S's, and here I just want to point out that there's a nice, shall we say, rubber wear line here on the side of the tread block. Okay, and you can see it's pretty consistent, all the tread blocks, as the tire goes around. This car did compete recently in an autocross, and this is where I was running the edge of my wear lines. And so that's important, so I just want to point that out to you. I could have gone probably a little bit deeper, and you can do that by reducing the tire pressure so the tire has more rollover and utilize a bit more of your tread block. But it also depends on how the car feels. If the front is not sticking or not providing enough grip, or if you want to change the bias and the turn-in of the car, you can adjust your tire pressures, and then you'll see your tread block wear line go up or down depending upon whether you move to high tire pressures or to low ones. Just want to take a quick look at these Toyo Proxy 4 Pluses. These are pretty shallow. I think the 35 series, no, 30 series right here. Tires on these 20-inch rims, so they're pretty stiff sidewall. They performed actually surprisingly well. They have sort of this all-season tread, and here you can tell that these tires have been chewed up a bit because these also went through an autocross. Unfortunately, it was in a cold weather condition, so the tires never really warmed up, so I was almost always running them cold, and that's why the wear is so bad, because then they start to chunk on the tarmac. But you can see from this tire there's also a worn or a bald inner tread, so the car does in the rear have a little bit too much negative camber, because I think after, it was 30 or 28,000 miles, this one wore on the inside. It wasn't a tire pressure problem, it's a camber problem. Great. Now at the track, you might have trouble reading the rubber tread block wear lines run after run. It might be covering up your old tracks, if you will, with your new track. So what I do is I take black shoe polish, pretty standard product. I used to run with white shoe polish, but now I'm all grown up and I run with black gloss shoe polish. And it turns out it does have a nice gloss finish to it. And so that now when I run, it's very easy to see where the next wear pattern is. Okay? And so you mark it a few different places on your tire. Make sure you get up and down the tread block from very low to very high, so that you're ensured that the run, the track run or the autocross run, will wear away that marking and you'll be able to see where it ends up. Now, I do want to warn you that just putting some shoe polish or chalking marks on your tire is not the only thing that's going to tell you if your car is performing well or not. It's also how quick is the turn-in, how do you feel the grip is it getting skaty, less grip, more slidey? Maybe you want to take the tire pressures down 2 psi. Or is it really sloppy and you feel the tires are just rolling over, in which case you want to pump them up a little bit, maybe 2 psi. The other thing to remember is that at an autocross or a track event, you may actually give too much steering action into a corner, or you have to recover the car, and maybe you give too much steering input, in which case you might scrawl the tires, that wah feeling that you're dragging them across the tarmac. Take a mental note of that, because that will wear the tread block very deeply over correcting and putting too much steering input, too much slip angle into the steering, and the tire will suffer because of that. So you might need to throw the readings out for that particular run. Okay. This is a notebook with all of my track days in it, and you'll see a lot of these quadrants here with the tire pressures in them. The arrow points to the front of the car, so this is front left, front right, rear left. And as the day progresses, I'm monitoring tire pressures and I'm taking notes, seeing if the tire provided good grip or not. And sometimes you'll see 2 down arrows, which means take it down 2 psi to try to dial in just the right pressure. And this goes on, New Hampshire Motor Speedway, Tamworth, what was that? Devon's Airfield, Air, Mass. That was an autocross. There's also map charts on there. And I'll plot up some of the data so you can take a look at it. This is the latest Jaguar in Weymouth, Mass, the Jaguar course, standard across the country, autocross, all the press. I'm really glad I plotted the data from my logbook into a spreadsheet program. I'm starting with this plot here, which actually is the tire measured at temperature versus run or session number. And I highlighted the difference between track events and autocross events. The track events are typically 15 or 20-minute sessions each hour, and they tend to warm the tires much more than an autocross, which is typically less than a 1-minute run per run or session. So you can see that there's a huge difference between these two types of events. Okay, and that will drive how we bleed the pressures down or not in the next few slides. This plot focuses on just the track tire pressures. The tire pressures are recorded after the session or run is over, and you'll see that in the first run or session the pressures jump from roughly an average of 35 psi cold start pre-event up to around 40 to 42 psi average. So that's a jump of 6-7 psi. And what I find is that the tires then will start to feel kind of skaty, or they don't have enough grip on corners. So I'll bleed the pressure down 2-3 psi. And then after the next run, they jump back up because the tires are still warming up. And eventually I bleed them down to where I really feel comfortable. And you see here run 5, 6. This is really the end of the day when the tires are nice and warm and I'm getting good, consistent track runs, and I really feel comfortable. So those are what I call my dialed in pressures. And you'll see that's between 38 and 40 psi, and that's pretty much across the left and right sides. I do want to highlight that the left front tire, the blue diamonds, are the ones that jump the most. And I mentioned earlier the weight bias on my car between left and right, front and back. And also the fact that most tracks run in a clockwise fashion, so there tend to be more right-hand corners which place more pressure on the left, particularly the left front. So that's the tire that you really have to watch the most in terms of its wear, in terms of its increase in temperature, and how much pressure builds up in it. Okay? This is a plot of the tire pressure data for various autocross events. It's a bit different plot, and the main takeaway is that the dialed in final pressures in run 4 or run 5 are somewhere between 35 psi and 38 psi, which is several psi lower than at a typical track event, the dialed in pressures there. Okay, so this is interesting to note. The other dash line that I threw on there was right at 37 psi, which is the recommended tire pressures posted on the door frame from the manufacturer. So it's interesting to note that the best autocross tire pressures are also recommended best tire pressure for the car. That concludes today's video about tire pressures for your Jaguar F-Type. I shared the techniques that I use to track the data and to find just the right tire pressures for the track event or autocross event that I'm at. I hope you can use this data and techniques to help you enjoy your car on the road. And remember, my friends, drive well.